Hello, everyone. I'm Craig Stover, Executive Director of Allen's Lane Arts Center, and welcome to ArtShow. Today, I have with me the fabulous Martina Johnson-Allen. Hello, Martina. Thanks for coming by today. Before I begin, I would just want to thank everybody for not only tuning in today, but for those people who have made donations towards the center, especially in these tough times of COVID. Your support is really very much appreciated. So thank you very much. That being said, hello, Martina. Thanks for coming by today.
Hello.
Hi. It was great to see you. I haven't seen you in years. We had a show of yours at Allen's Lane probably about 2011, 2012 or so, and I was fascinated by your work then. And so I'm thrilled to be catching up with you today.
Yes, thank you.
So I'd like to start where I always start, which is, can you tell me how your life in the arts began?
Yes, well, I think it began at the beginning, from the cradle.
From the cradle?
We're not doing art.
Oh, yeah?
My parents always had lots of materials around for me to work with. My dad was a computer programmer. And back in the day when the computers were big as a refrigerator, they had these long sheets of paper with holes on the side. And when they discarded those papers, he would bring some home. So I had always had papers to draw on. And I always had crayons and paints and just always something to do.
And your mother was?
Materials. And my mom worked in the garment industry. So she would bring home her discarded garments and I would sew.
Do you still have any of that work from when you were a kid?
I don't think so. It's funny how things disappear when you were a kid.
Yeah.
Things just disappear. So I don't have any of my original works.
Yeah.
I had some people when I was maybe in some drawings from high school. Maybe I still have.
Yes. So your life. So you come from an artistic household.
Yes.
But then you went to school for what?
For elementary education. I wanted to teach.
Okay. But you also did some undergrad work too, right? Or graduate work.
Yes. Well, as I taught school, I realized that I had a passion for art, especially art history. And unfortunately, when I was in college, they didn't have a lot of, they didn't talk about Black artists at all. Mm-hmm. So I didn't get angry about it. I just went to the Free Public Library in Philadelphia, the main branch, and I spent days in the art department doing my own research. And then I went to rare bookstores to buy books on the Black artists. And now with Amazon and all the other online book distributors, I was able to create my own library and educate myself.
Nice. So do you still have your own library in your house?
Yes, I do. I have more books than I need. Well, we always have so many.
Never more than you need.
I have really educated myself so far as the art trends in the United States and the world.
Oh,
and I try to fit myself in, of course.
Yeah. Well, I think your work fits in extremely well. In fact, I think it's a leader in the field, actually. I really respond very well to your work. So you went to school, you had this career as a teacher.
Yes.
Did you always have a studio in your home? Did you ever have an outside studio?
I always had a studio in my home, and I always enrolled in one of the schools in the city because they had the greatest art studios and the greatest facilities. For instance, I started off as a printmaker, and with printmaking, you just can't set up anywhere.
Right.
And of course, in the early days, all schools had printmaking departments, but then the law said, well, you have to have your studio this way and that way. Mm-hmm. And you have to have a certain amount of ventilation, and you can only use certain chemicals at certain times. Your floors had to be covered with certain materials, or somebody can do something, you have a giant explosion. So we all got really upset about that, of course. So I always enrolled in at the universities so I could do my printmaking.
Yeah.
Tyler School of Art had the best printmaking facilities, and then the University of the Arts, and then we had I wrote it down because I can't remember everything. The Brandywine Workshop.
Oh yeah, right.
Owned by Alan Edmonds, and that's the greatest opportunity I've ever had for printmaking.
Well, I know you primarily as from your collage and from your drawings.
Yeah.
Do you still do printmaking?
Well, for health reasons, I don't,
Mm-hmm.
because the chemicals are still very harsh.
Mm-hmm.
I miss all that.
Okay.
So I call myself a mixed media artist because I work in so many different ways, but everything comes from or stems from that printmaking experience.
Really? That's,
yeah.
Now I have to look at your work in a whole new way now.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with your printmaking work, so I can't wait to search it out.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. So you are currently in your studio.
Yes,
right?
I follow the sun. My studio I have many rooms in my house, and each room is separate the studio. And wherever the sun is, that's where I work.
Oh, nice.
The sun gives me a lot of energy.
And where do you live?
Excuse me?
Where do you live?
Oh, I live in Lavrock, Pennsylvania, which is right outside of Philadelphia.
So in better times, when we didn't have COVID, could people come and visit your studio?
Yes, by appointment, yes.
Okay, so you would encourage that?
Yes, I'm saying in a hesitant way because, it's your space is very private and intimate. So it's not like an open, like a gallery downtown where everybody walks in. If someone comes to my studio, it's usually it's a very intimate, personal setting, or circumstance.
So you told me earlier that every room in your house is a different studio?
Yes.
Now, is each one dedicated for a certain thing, or is it just you're working everywhere?
Well, like I said, I'm following the sun. So
okay.
I'd rather be a morning person, but I'm still a night person. But ideally, if I get up like 6 o'clock in the morning, the sun is very strong downstairs. So I'd like to be in that area. Like right now, on the second layer of my house, in this room, this is where there's a lot of sun.
Do you ever start working on a piece and then move from studio to studio with it to follow the sun?
Yeah, sometimes, yes. Okay. Sometimes I do.
Do you work on more than one piece at a time?
Well, it's not a good way to work, but I do.
Why do you say it's not a good way to work?
If you're working on 5 pieces, you never get anything finished. You just 5 pieces you're working on forever.
And then forever.
But one piece informs the other. So I guess it's like an orchestra type thing when you're working. When you're doing your art, everything has to have a place. You just can't, like, for instance, when I worked as a teacher, I always thought, well, if I could do my art full time, I'd probably get more done. But that's not true, because you need that teaching experience to inform the art. Just like with the COVID thing, it's very hard for me to do art at times because I don't have those other externals influencing and informing my art, like being with people, even being at the gym or seeing relatives. All those things inform your art. It's so important. Yeah. Like we have the time because of the isolation, but you don't have the stimulation. So it's like a long equation. You need everything.
So tell me a little bit about, I guess, pre-COVID times. I'm curious about your inspiration. What I've found is that artists that I talk to tend to be into one of two categories when it comes to inspiration. There are the kind of artists that need to work, and they know how to start a work, and it's through developing it that they get inspired, and and the work sort of continues. But then there's another kind of artist that I've met that they might need to like take a walk or something, and then boom, the inspiration hits them like a lightning bolt.
Yeah.
Which way would you say you're more towards?
I think I'm a little bit of both.
Really?
But
Okay.
like you said, take a walk or do something specific, or sometimes just dreaming about something or seeing something,
Mm-hmm.
seeing a color or bird out the window doing something.
Mm-hmm.
It all comes together.
So your inspiration comes from a wide variety of things, from life, I assume.
Yes. And some things I want to fit in purposefully, like my travels to Ethiopia. I'm very interested in Ethiopia, the language, the art, the people, and everything. And I want to put that into all my work.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it doesn't translate that way.
Mm-hmm.
But that experience is there. But I wanted I wanted to do something and say, oh, and have somebody look at it and say, oh, that looks Ethiopian. But it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Or someone will say, oh, I don't see people also, I don't see the African influence or the Indian influence in your work. And I don't understand why not, because some people just want to see something very graphic,
Mm-hmm.
but it's there. And then some people even have the nerve to say, well, your work doesn't look feminine enough. And I'll say, well, what does that mean? You
That's
know,
a terrible thing to say.
but people say all sorts, you say things like that. And I've even had an art teacher who felt my work and said, oh, your work is so hard. And I'm thinking, well, why does it have to be hard or soft or any of those things you're talking about?
Yeah.
You know, like it's a culmination of all of my experiences, and what you see is me. But people want to see those influences, especially when it comes to African American art. People won't want to buy it or appreciate it unless it's figurative and it shows African American figures.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very, very, very it can be very disconcerting.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why I'm attracted to your work, because I do see it as you're a filter. It's your life experiences and your influences are going through you, which is why
Yeah.
I don't see them as just pure Ethiopian or what.
Right.
You're a Philadelphian, you're an American, right? So it still goes
Right.
through that filter, and I see the work. So
Yeah.
my next question is, when I first saw your work, what really the first thing that struck me and strikes a lot of people is it's your palette, right? You tend to use, or at least at that point in time, you were using a lot of vivid and saturated colors. Even like the work that's behind you, the color piece that you have there. And I'm curious, did your palette evolve to get to that point, or have you always been attracted to these strong colors?
Well, that's an interesting question, because as a printmaker, you use black and white and shades in between. And I really like that control. It's very, very, printmaking is very defined, and you don't go overboard with your boundaries. So I worked in black and white for a long time, and then I did duotones. And so I felt, and printmaking was so demanding, I felt like I couldn't do color and printmaking at the same time. But something wanted me to do color. So I started using acrylics, and I started to cut paper so I wouldn't have any restrictions. But I started off with black and white, which is very demanding to use just black and white. And there's so many shades in between. And when you're printmaking, you have to have a lot of control so you can get the finest of the black, like very light gray tones. and to the darkest of the dark. And sometimes you have to say to yourself, how dark, how black can I get this part? You know, you think it's really black, but it prints up differently. And then when you want something extremely light, you might not see it at all, it might disappear.
Yeah.
So when you're printmaking, you're always, when you put the marks on your paper, you always have to say, is that going to come out lighter or darker? You know, because what you see on your stone or on your plate isn't necessarily what you're going to get. So it's a very intense operation. And plus you, at one point you involve other artists like the printers or other artists in the studio who have to help you with the process, because if you don't do things in a timely fashion, you may end up with nothing.
Right. That's words of wisdom.
Like your image will turn completely black or disappear altogether.
Yeah. So the collage works that I know primarily of yours.
Yes.
When you first started making those, were they also in black and whites?
No, I had made a tremendous shift.
Okay.
You know, I took a dive. I said, okay, I want to do color. So I left printmaking, and then I just used colors all over the place. No rules.
Yeah.
Just do it. Yes.
Does the color palette does some of that come from your studies of, say, Ethiopian art or historical art, or do
Yeah,
you?
it was historical because I first really liked the work of Matisse and how he used just color, no tones or anything or dimensions. It's just color, and I appreciated that. And at the same time, I was still looking at Charles White, who just did just pencil drawings so beautifully. So I wanted to put those two together. But I didn't want any rules when it came to color. And eventually, after I calmed down, I did do some, work, looked at the color wheel. I think the color wheel on my desk. I never paid attention to the color wheel, but I started like recently trying to understand the color wheel or use the rules.
Well, it sounds like I need to get you back to printmaking somehow. That I'd love to hear.
I'm still working on one thing about printmaking is after you struggle with your image, you can get 1,000 copies of it.
Yeah.
But we should use the word copies when we're talking about printmaking, because they're not copies. In addition. And each one is slightly different from the other. But with technology, we get prints and copies and all those terms mixed up, and it does terrible injustice to the printmaking process.
Yeah, that I can believe that.
I have some prints here I'd like to show.
Sure.
Okay, now these two are from a bigger print that I did the Brandywine workshop.
Oh, nice.
But I cut them and collaged them.
Okay.
And one has complete color, and one here, as you see, has controlled color. I just used the brown duotones.
When were you making those at Brandywine?
When did I make my Brandywine? Oh my goodness. I made the complete print maybe about 10 years ago. But see all the way back here? I cut them all up. Oh,
those were all prints.
Yeah, it was one big let's say 30 by 34 print. But since I had a stack of them, I could go through each stack and redo them. And that's the marvelous thing about printmaking. See this image here? Shows up here too, but with a different configuration.
Very nice. So you reinvented.
This one went wild with color, and this one a little control. I just used the brown duotones. And in this one, hardly any change at all, just reconfiguration. So with prints, they're really wonderful. It's a wonderful medium.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait till COVID
So
is
much,
over. I'm dying to see that piece
you
in real
know.
life, one behind you. I gotta come.
Oh, these pieces.
Yeah.
Yes, this is, how many do I have? I have, let's see, 5 times 9, 45. I have 45 pieces. Each one's different.
Wow.
But
So
I've never exhibited those because when they were finished, then COVID set in and I didn't have time. I couldn't make the connection anymore.
so even though you have, 45 pieces behind you,
Yes,
they all sort of stem from the same
print.
print itself.
Yes,
And
it's
so
100.
so I'm curious about like the theme of not only that print, but is there a way that you could sort of talk about, is there like an overall theme to your work that you would be able to identify? I know you
Yeah.
have lots of multiples, but what if somebody were to ask you, what's the theme of your work? What would you say?
Uh, it's about, first of all, it's a very feminist piece. They're all women here, but they're different stages of development. They go in and out of existence. And for the moment, I've forgotten the name of the piece. Oh, that's terrible. But it describes women in all kinds of faces.
Mm-hmm.
Because each woman here has a different face. And you wear different things, and you're different, and you're in different places, and you create your own environment. So that's essentially what this piece is about.
So would you say that the majority of your work is about people?
And space. For instance, this piece right here,
Mm-hmm.
I did a collection of boxes.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, all the boxes are the same size and the same depth.
Mm-hmm.
But I use different techniques to make some pieces look deeper or more shallow than the others. So it's about spatial relationships. I like that. And we always talk about, what we would save if we had to evacuate suddenly. That's always a big topic.
Right.
And so that's what I'm thinking of. Or what would you fill your space with to define yourself?
That's
Because
fantastic.
the space is very political.
Mm-hmm.
And but you don't need you can need a small space, maybe just a corner, like my favorite book for children is called Evan's Corner.
Mm.
It's about a little boy who lived in a small apartment and he wanted a bigger space, but his mother said, you can have a corner of this room. And he filled that corner with all his things. And he became happy. And I think that's a good lesson for life. Like, you don't have to have the world.
Right.
But some leaders of our political leaders want to take charge of the world. But most of us just want a little space, and we can create that space, like in Evan's Corner. Just put your stuff in it that symbolize you, and honor that space. His mother honored his space. Like, he had a little corner, but no one else was allowed in it, and he put only his things in it. Yes.
So speaking of mothers, I can't help but think when you mentioned earlier that your mother worked at a fabric store. Is that what you said?
Yes. Well, Philadelphia used to be a fabric, what do you call it? Industry. Downtown, the stores were.
It was a fabric district. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So I
made things. They didn't just sell fabric. They made. Well, in this country years ago, things were made here.
What? The reason I asked,
in the garment district where they actually made clothes. I think the company was called Cabana Beachwear.
The piece that you just showed us looks like it's made out of fabrics.
Oh, this piece?
Yeah. Is that a stretch?
No, it's not. But this piece here is a mask. This is I took the face away. I want to do the face over again.
Okay.
But this is made out of all fabric.
Okay.
See that? And these little pouches, you see these pouches?
Mm-hmm.
I was inspired by the Mantisi in one of the countries in Central Africa. They did their power symbols made out of sacks, little sacks.
Mm-hmm.
But I did that before I found out about that culture.
Hmm.
I said,
Really?
oh, cultural connection that's inward.
Nice connection.
In the Congo, that's how they did their artwork using a lot of little pouches and sacks.
So I have seen some of the things that you've shown me. I've seen them before, but I'm curious, what are you currently working on?
What am I currently working on? I'm working on so many things. Well, I'm working on the collection back here,
Okay.
and I've done several things. I've had the wall collections. I have a book, and then I'm doing my color prints.
Okay.
And I'm also working on my books. I always loved making books, even when I was a little
Wow.
girl.
I didn't know that was a book.
Yes, well, books are redefined. They don't have to have pages, just have to have the structure. And I have these little designs, call these feathers.
Has COVID changed your working at all, or was all these things were you working on before COVID hit?
I think COVID gave me extra time, so there's things I'm revisiting. Like I've been working on this book for years, and I took it apart and made 2 more books from it. So COVID's given me time to re-examine things, because as artists, we just have to keep going, and we'll look at something and want to change it. We tell ourselves we don't have time.
Mm-hmm.
But I like being able to revisit artwork. I think that's great to be able to revisit, because it's really never finished. Like if you have a time schedule like an art show to do, you may have to just say, oh, let me do this so it could be hung up. But that's a terrible thing to do, to finish something so it could be put on display. It's like, you're not doing the art any justice. I'd rather art to be completely finished, and then have an offer for it to be on display.
Sounds to me like you've got buckets of ideas for future works.
Yes, I do, and I worry. Since I'm getting older, it's getting scary. Like, oh my gosh, how much time do I have left? And I talk to other artists, and they feel the same way. Like they look at the materials and say, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to my materials when I pass away? Somebody's just going to say, what is, let's get rid of this, or what? Oh, it's just a scary feeling.
Is there any one big project that you haven't done but would love the chance to do, like a giant series or big paintings or even smaller? Is there anything that you haven't been able to accomplish yet?
Yeah, I'd like to do a huge group exhibition with other artists. I really like working with other artists under a theme. Now, I've done that in the past. I did a theme, some healing sacks. And it really grew to be a big exhibition. I invited all kinds of people. I didn't invite any males though. It's a female exhibition. But next time I'll invite males to participate. But it was the scope of what people thought about and how people produce a basic sack was so intriguing. And a lot of the people who were in the show have passed away. This is like over 10 years ago. And we lost a lot of people because of cancer. In fact, I developed it myself and stopped the program. But I had continued. But I just got so carried away with the process, with the cancer.
So another big group show, if that was on, that would be what you jump at.
Right, because it did go international, but like I said, it just stopped.
Yeah.
And I wish it hadn't stopped it.
Yeah.
And I met so many. The first people who lived the farthest were the people from Venezuela,
Hmm.
you know, in Argentina. And some people who lived in Japan too.
Well, it's
Yeah.
great that we now have, with the internet, we have a much more connected global world. And it's great to see that your work is spreading throughout the world. And the reason I bring that up is when we advertise these art shows, we always try to point people towards an artist's website or where they can connect to the artist or where they can learn more information. And I thought the website that you suggested to go along was very unusual, and I was hoping you'd talk a little bit about it. You had us post the State Department's website.
Oh yes, that's a great program. I don't know what they're doing now,
Okay.
but that's fantastic.
How did you get connected?
Well, it's sort of like, well, I was showing work at the African American Museum in Philadelphia, and you know how directors talk. They say they're going to do something, and if the director knows you, they'll say, "Oh, I like that theme. I know an artist who will be, good for that." So I think the people from what did you call it? The art. I can't remember the name.
The State Department.
The State Department. Yes,
Right.
They were talking to the people from the African American Museum,
Mm.
and those folks mentioned my name. Okay, so I did a show there in Washington, which was wonderful, and Hillary Clinton was there too. It was in her honor. She gave this huge show. We took lots of pictures with her because we thought that she's going to be the next president.
Right. Yeah.
And as artists, we wanted to say, "Oh, look, we're with the president." But how that worked out. But so I exhibited in Washington. And then they said, okay, with all the embassies, we're going to travel certain artists with certain ambassadors. And as long as they're at that embassy, your work will be there too.
Mm.
And when they leave, of course, they take the art with them and then the next ambassador. Mm-hmm. So I was with the embassy in Nigeria. Mm-hmm. But when I went to Djibouti, when my work went to Djibouti, have you heard of Djibouti?
No.
Now people have, it's a little small country, in the northern part of Africa. Mm. It's not far from Tigray, where all the fighting's going on now, but Djibouti's very small. But they kept my work.
Really?
I'm very honored. Yeah, they kept it.
That's wonderful.
Yes, I thought it was a great honor because I always wanted, that African connection. You never know how it's going to come along. So anyway, it's a wonderful program, the Art Embassies, because their goal is to show the artwork of American artists at the embassies throughout the world. And they can either keep the work or they can borrow it. Mm-hmm. So I just thought it was a wonderful opportunity.
Well, the web page that they have up really shows your work off really well and makes it.
Oh, thank you.
It's just extraordinary. So yeah. I am curious if somebody wants to get in touch with you, because one of the things that I love to do is to tell people that, artists aren't these mysterious, beings, that they're human beings that you can reach out to and ask questions about their artwork and engage them. So if somebody saw your work and wanted to ask you a question, how do they get in contact with you?
Well, they can email me.
Okay. All right. So that's usually the number one way to do it. Okay. Yeah. So it's in
because with all the other avenues, sometimes things get mixed up, and you just don't know. You just don't. You just things get mixed up. So I think the best way is to email me.
Okay. Well, I want to encourage people to do that, and if possible, I would love to figure out a way to get a photograph of those pieces behind you. I'm totally mesmerized by them.
Oh, I have a lot of photographs of those pieces behind me.
Let's talk afterwards, because I want to see if we can get them up on social media or do something to share them with a larger group. So
I would be honored. Thank you so much.
Well, believe it or not, our time has whizzed by. I want to I want to thank you
Oh,
again
thank
for
you. I-
coming by. Maybe we can, squeak out a part 2 later on.
Yes. Well,
But
I'm sorry for interrupting. I want to thank the Allen's Lane Art Center for inviting me to do this interview. I really appreciate it.
well, it's a pleasure talking to you. I mean, I think we have a few other things to talk about, especially about printmaking that I want to catch up with you about. Um, but again, I also want to thank all of our viewers for coming by
Yeah.
and checking out this interview. And again, to all those who have made donations to Allen's Lane Art Center, your support is desperately welcomed and needed. Thank you very much. And we hope to see you again at another episode of ArtShow. Thank you.
Thank you.